So today was our first episode of the HR Evolution or Revolution. We are joined by Sallie Reid, the VP of People and Culture at ACV Auctions. Bobby Spaziani and I kicked off this passion project because we both have a passion for HR. I have a passion for helping people, and I saw the joint disconnect between business and understanding the value of their organization really comes from their people. Treating them as a true asset to the organization. And we believe that we can change the world through better HR and get businesses back to really where they should be in today's day and age to help them kind of stay ahead of their competition. Their most competitive asset, again, is their people. And we're really asking top HR leaders like Sallie Reid today to really understand how she developed those vitally important internal relationships, how she involves herself with the business. So hopefully our HR community can learn something and apply it in their daily lives. So I'm Kevin Rustici and my partner, Bobby Spaziani.
And Kevin, I think you hit it on the head. This is certainly a passion project that you and I are near and dear to. I think what really kind of encouraged me to kind of continue this and start this podcast with you is just my own evolution in HR and what I've seen the function kind of grow to. And so when I got into HR about 10 years ago, I really viewed it was kind of viewed as an administrative or transactional function. And in some ways, it was viewed as sort of the no function. The business would come to your HR representative, ask them, permission to do certain things, and HR would give them a quick no. And I found that sort of counterintuitive, because if we want to sit at the table with our business and provide value upwards and side to side with our business partners, we have to find a way to meet in the middle, to say yes, but to let the business know and kind of, make them aware of some of the risks and challenges. But something I read recently kind of hit me hard and kind of encouraged me to continue down this road. And that was that profit shouldn't be a goal or priority of the business, but really an outcome of the people and the culture that you create within your organization.
I love that. And speaking about business, I know Sallie Reid at ACV Auctions. I don't want to keep you on the icebox too long over there. But I know you're working towards building one of the best companies in the world, and that's why you were brought into ACV Auctions. So welcome to the show, Sallie. Do you want to quickly just introduce yourself and tell us your role there at ACV Auctions?
Absolutely. A pleasure to be here with you, Kevin and Bobby, and excited to be on the podcast with you guys today. So as you mentioned earlier, I am the VP of People and Culture here at ACV Auctions, and you are absolutely right. It is our intent to be the best employer to work for. We really want to put our people first. We do put our people first, and there's a real commitment across the whole organization to do so. So excited to talk about that today and share what knowledge I might be able to.
Hey, well, I know you're a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to get into that, but let's have a little fun first, right? I don't think the employees really know that you guys have a life outside of HR sometimes. It's only about their lives, right? So, all right, let's start with something easy. If you really had to go to a restaurant and you're ordering your favorite meal, what's your favorite dish?
So there's an interesting thing. Anyone that knows me, hands down, if you order me a bacon double cheeseburger, no bun, we're good to go.
That's the key to your heart.
It's very easy.
All right,
and the second thing that goes with that is if anyone finds me a Diet Dr. Pepper, you are a friend for life. So those two things together are a win.
Oh, man, that's easy. We can do that. All right, well, you're cruising into work. First day, you're going into ACV Auctions. What song were you listening to on full blast?
Oh my gosh, that's kind of funny, actually. So first day, I wasn't cruising in the office. I was cruising into my kitchen, which was, in that work from home time. So I wasn't really listening to much besides trying to make sure that everyone else in the house was going to give me the opportunity to do what I needed for work that day. So I would say, I don't know, that day I probably wasn't doing much. I say I kind of listen to a little bit of everything. I might have a little affinity for Snoop, but day one, week one, it was literally walking into the kitchen or the dining room and hoping that the three people that were home from college and high school in my house would stay in their spaces.
Well, you touched on the pandemic side of it, right? And a lot of people started their jobs during the pandemic and never got to feel I guess the in-person connections with their peers, with their managers, with their senior leadership. How are you able to step into the role and I guess hit the ground running?
So, it was really something that we had to make a concerted effort for. So I started in a people role during a global pandemic, not really being able to be in person. And that's really what drives me, right, is people. And so it was really a very focused effort into using, things like Zoom in a little bit of a different way, being focused, because I wasn't walking by someone in the hallway, didn't have a chance just to meet people. And so I did then have to, really try to connect. And with that being said, we had a lot of our teammates work from home, but we also had folks that were in our offices. We also had a lot of our teammates that were out in the field. And so as soon as, we were able to, within the states that we are, I was able to get out there and, help write some cards with our vehicle condition inspectors, come into the office and see our folks that were in here on a regular basis. So that really, I tried to create those bonds across, and with each group, it's a little bit different. And everybody's experience during this is a little bit different. But really coming into a people role, it was important to kind of get out there and have people know, that we were still here to support. They weren't out there because, to your point earlier, I wasn't the only person that started a job during a global pandemic. People joined our company during that time. People joined other companies during that time. And it was really something that, no matter what kind of playbook a company had, no matter how small or large they were, I'm not so sure anybody had a chapter that said, unscheduled global pandemic. Yeah. And so there wasn't anything to really refer back to, right? I mean, you think no matter how good you are at planning. And by that point, when I joined here in the fall, I think a lot of companies felt like we've got this. But what we didn't really see coming was this continued evolution of, where we were. And so things like, loosening of restrictions, putting back in things that were okay one day were different the next. And really kind of navigating through that together as a team was super important for us. And I do feel like that's how we did that here, is we all kind of leaned in, we helped each other out. Where there were areas of opportunity, we kind of called out each other on those things that we could do differently, or where we had things we could change. And then together we've evolved. I wasn't here for that long before, obviously went from a private company to a public company. So lots of kind of things happened fast, and a lot of growth in that time as well.
Yeah. So you had to chase your peers. One of the important things, though, that we talk about is those internal relationships, right? And you talked about how you were able to develop it. Yeah. For our audience, right? If you're talking to another HR professional that's looking to climb the ranks and evolve or revolutionize the way that they're doing business within their organization, what are some tips or tricks that you would have in those initial conversations with those managers, the senior leadership, the key stakeholders? Like, what is Sallie doing to really, I guess, get to understand what's going to motivate them? What do they define as success? What are some key takeaways that our audience can take from conversations that you typically like to have?
So I think one of the most important things really to do when you operate in the people HR space is to really understand your business. If you don't understand your business and you don't understand what the needs are, it's really hard to deliver at a high level. And so, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask if you can go to meetings that maybe aren't in your specific wheelhouse, because you need to understand, because how can you help people, grow and develop? How can you coach? How can you work on career development if you don't understand what those pieces are? And it doesn't mean that you need to be an expert. It does mean that you need to understand so that you can operate in a space where if you need to get A and B done as a company, how can you help grow and develop and coach your people to get there?
I love that.
Absolutely. Sallie, I think that's great. I tell HR practitioners all the time that I'm coaching that the most important thing that you can do as you step into an HR generalist or business partner role is really to kind of understand how your business makes money and how they can lose money on the other end. You can teach or you can understand HR policy and procedures, but knowing how your business line, specifically kind of generates profit or helps the organization, achieve success is key. Sallie, if you don't mind, I want to jump back to the pre-IPO days. So, you mentioned you kind of joined in October.
Yep.
You IPO'd in March. That had to be a wild ride for one. So, congratulations there.
Thank you. Yeah, ton of fun. Wild ride, lots of fun.
Can you take our listeners through sort of the IPO process from sort of the build up to launch and maybe kind of put it in more of a people perspective?
Sure. And so, I think one of the things that I always try to be cautious of is people think suddenly that, a company is public and like the world changes overnight. for most companies, when you go from being private to public, you're already doing the right things as a private company. You're already having great practices in place. And so one night you go to bed and you work for a private company, and the next day you wake up and you work for a public company. And while there's a lot more visibility to that, in reality, your day-to-day should not effectively change, because the things that got you to the point to be able to go from private to public are the things that got you to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super cautious with my teammates. I had worked for both private and public companies before coming here to ACV. And so I understood that. But I do think, going from private to public, some people maybe had an idea that things would be majorly changed. And while there are certain things that change from a reporting perspective and certain requirements, the day-to-day of what most people do in their job did not really change from day one to day two.
That's awesome.
Interesting.
How did that add, I guess, to the culture? Would you say like the team camaraderie totally changed and shifted, or did you see more teamwork happening because they were all working towards, I guess, that big goal? Like,
I think to the earlier point, we were already doing those things that got us to that point. And so we just continued to execute on those at the highest level. And as going from private to public, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and, a limited number of folks that know, up to certain points of that. And again, for a lot of folks, it was, day 1, 2, 3, I'm doing these things. Day 24, 25, 26, I'm doing those same things. I'm going out, I'm getting my job done. I have the support I need. I have the tools I need to do my job, and those things don't change kind of from one to the next.
That's awesome. How cool was it to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange?
It was pretty cool, actually. It was fun, to be in Times Square, to be there with my team, many of whom I had met for the first time that morning as we headed to NASDAQ in person.
Wow.
So that was kind of a really interesting, like, hey, how are you? We're going public today, which is pretty cool. But it's a great group of folks. And as we talked about earlier, we all felt like we knew each other already, because we've all learned to use, formats like this, right? I mean, I can create a relationship on Zoom just as well in person at this point. It's not unusual, but it was a lot of fun. To be able to do that as a team. Very exciting.
It was so cool when I saw your picture and you get to see the VP of People and Culture up on with like the big guys. And it was like you were my idol, right? I kept calling you a unicorn. I was like, oh my God, Sallie's up there. She's rubbing elbows with those guys at the New York Stock.
Oh, you're so funny. Yeah, we're all one
awesome.
team. And I'm very lucky to be on a team, that, we are all equal here, within our executive team. And we all, lean in our company. I think that's one of the things that is, part of our culture, is that we all connect really well together, regardless of what people's roles are, regardless of whether, you're in the field, whether you're at headquarters, whether you're in, accounting or finance or on the people team. We all lean in and help each other, and it is one team.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it sounds like you guys can protect each other's time too, because we all know you need more time in your day to kind of get to this fun stuff. One of the things I wanted to ask, because I know a little bit more about your history, and one of the most prized companies I think to come out of Rochester is Wegmans. Obviously, everybody knows Xerox, we know Kodak, we know some of the big hitters that were on the publicly traded themselves. But a private company owned by the Wegmans family, everybody loves going to Wegmans because it's an experience. And I think people really enjoy the satisfaction of the employees of Wegmans, right? Everybody seems to always have a smile on their face. They're always willing to help you out. And I can honestly say in other department stores, you don't get that same feel. What did you learn, I guess, coming from the Wegmans family tree, if you will, if we're going to kind of do the coach comparison to the NFL? What did you learn in that role, and how did that propel you to become the strategic HR business partner that really focuses on the people and the culture?
Yeah, so I'll actually start a little bit before that. So pretty much every job I've ever had, starting at my first job, was really kind of customer facing and really kind of with a service mentality. And that continued when I went to Wegmans, of course, right, as you can tell. But really being there was, understanding the concept of when you put your teammates, your employees first, the business results then follow behind. And I've had that pretty much in every company I've ever worked for. I've either gotten really lucky or I've been really smart about that, but I've really worked for companies that, do value that, and that understand that when you do right by your employees, when you give them what they need to be successful, and when they feel taken care of, they're going to then give great service to, whether it's external customers, whether it's, whatever they're doing in their day. When they feel taken care of, they can then excel.
Yeah. I think that's great, Sally. And kind of going back to your history, kind of as Kevin mentioned, growing up through Wegmans and then kind of elevating your career through organizations like GPC and Delaware North, how have you sort of seen the function of HR sort of evolve over time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely over time, it's gone from what I would call a paper push, right? You do the tactical, technical things, and that's what people think you do. You're a party planner. You handle the paperwork piece. You're the disciplinarians, and in reality, right, the evolution of the people space of HR is really a partner. It's really helping people to be the best they can be, and as a result, you're actually driving the results of the business every day. And so there's no more of this, HR should sit in this side space. It's, at the table all the time, connecting and coordinating. And I think that's been, I've been in HR a little bit longer than you have, but during that time, there really has been this evolution, and there is always going to be a need for the tactical and technical. And I don't want to underplay that, because those things all have to happen. But then there's also the very strategic partnership and how you use those technical and tactical to drive the success of a business.
I love that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
When
It's been exciting to watch that, right? I think, some companies had a little bit of an earlier learning curve on that, but most folks are now on that. It's not just, are you getting those basic things done? It's what's the next level? What are you doing your pathing? How are you helping people to develop? How do they see themselves with you in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And what are you doing to help people see that?
Wow.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of that takes like critical conversations for you, Sallie, right? A lot of that is you have to put yourself out there. And I think sometimes we let our fear kind of hold us hostage, right? We're almost afraid to speak up in a meeting because we're afraid of being told no ourselves, right? Or that's a bad idea. In those critical conversations, because it is something that I am terrible at. I am on my third book, I think, on a workbook now on critical conversations. But when you are working and trying to, I guess, develop a manager from a manager to a leader, and you're really trying to get them to understand how they're having a negative impact on the relationship, on the culture, how do you have those critical conversations with those managers? And what advice would you give, again, to the audience in HR that might have a manager that has the highest turnover in the organization, but they've been there for 20 years and they're almost protected? How do they have that critical conversation with that manager that they're looking to evolve into a leader?
So I think the first thing is you need to create a connection with that person. And so you can understand where they're coming from, because you can't come in with I have the solution. I know your problem. Here's what you need to do. So you really need to invest yourself in the process. You need to find out, tell me what's going on. Tell me, how's your team? What are you thinking? And trying to get to the root cause before we come in and deliver a solution. So understanding where that person's coming from, and then trying to identify where those risk or gap areas are, and then working together on it so that it doesn't feel like this is being done to me. It's really a connection, and it's really kind of an opportunity together to identify challenges and then work through what, the solutions or opportunities might be. So that foundation is super important.
And I know that a lot of times with the advancements in technology, right, everything is evolving so fast. We've seen job titles change by the minute. It seems like when a new piece of technology, but it's the companies that are smartly using technology, if that's even a word.
Yep.
I know that's an important part to what you do, because you want to give your team's time to be in the field, having these conversations, building these types of relationships, not only externally, but internally as well. How do you see the future of technology enabling the success of HR to continue this progression or this evolution, if you will, into that key business partner to an organization's success?
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of different types of technology, right, that we could be talking about. We could talk about things like we are right now, right? I could be 2,000 miles away from someone and feeling like they're in the room next to me. You're talking about technology that can pull data analytics and reporting. And so depending on, which type that we're talking about, I think it's also acknowledging, however, that those are only tools. They don't kind of take the place of doing other things. So you might have a performance management system. You may have, data points, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you actually still have to have the conversation with your teammate about what you need them to do. And they need to be able to have the conversation about what they need from you as a leader. And so understanding that technology is a tool, it doesn't take the place of what we need to do. And I think that's really important. It doesn't become I put it in a document. Did you read it? You still need to have the conversation. Hey, Kevin, let's talk about how everything's going. How are you feeling about your performance, right? And you can kind of use the system to back it up or to give data about, information, but really it still comes back to the human touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there, and I kind of want to piggyback off of that because we see the hot topics all over, HR message boards at conferences around this idea of people analytics, and we know that some organizations are a little bit more receptive than others and a little bit more further along. So for those organizations that have recognized the need and are receptive to data analytics or people analytics in the HR space, how do you think HR leaders can come to the table and provide value or ROI to executive leadership with those data points?
So when you think about data points across a business, right, whether it's in the HR people space, whether it's in any other space, that is usually what drives people to understand, right? How are you doing in a store's performance? What are your sales like? What are your metrics? And so when you're able to speak in the same type of language or information, it tends to connect better with people who are used to functioning that way versus having them look at things from a different perspective. And so being able to come with the same type of metrics as far as whether it's anything, basic like turnover, whether it's time to fill roles, or whether it's more complex solutions, when you can present it in a way that's familiar, you tend to be able to have better connections.
I love that.
Do you think that is kind of, the same approach that, say, a smaller or mid-sized organization can take where people analytics aren't being discussed today?
Yeah, and I don't think people analytics has to be overly complex either, right? Depending on the scope of the business, depending on someone's knowledge, right? They may be more entry level in a people or an HR space, but just to start to kind of talk with that, type of language, or even if it's, last month we had X amount of people leave and we hired Y amount, it doesn't have to be super detailed. And I think people get a little bit nervous about analytics because they think that you need to be, a superstar in analytics to even be able to enter the conversation. And I think the reality is we all start somewhere with everything that we do. And so starting somewhere gets you on the path to where you might end up. But if you don't ever start, you're never going to get to that end point.
Sure. Great
What
point.
are you telling your team to always kind of stay ahead, right? I mean, we're always learning. We know in leadership, a constant learning is a must. And like you were saying, culture is never like finite. It's always evolving. It's always adapting kind of to the socioeconomic complex that's happening outside of its walls that it has no control over. But how are you upskilling your HR staff? Like, what new skills do you think will be needed by HR in the future? Where do you think the field is headed, and how can HR professionals, what should they be focusing on now? I know you touched on building their business acumen, probably understanding a profit and loss statement just at its highest level, just so they can have that commonality. Like you mentioned, there's just both speaking in the same language. But what skills do you think are going to be necessary in order to be successful like you have been in HR? And do you think HR will be potentially more CEO, executive director roles in the future as well?
I think they already are in many cases. I mean, we talked earlier, it depends on each org and where they are, and where the vision is. Some of it is, what an organization may or may not be ready for, but also it's, what the HR practitioner, expects out of their team. I think back probably, 10 years, as I was growing in my career, I had a leader that reached out to another one and said, I don't know about this. What should I do? And, the answer was, I'm not sure why you're asking me. I'm not the expert. Why don't you go back and ask, our HR team and do what they ask? And so really having that support, and having people understand that, people may be experts in what they're doing. We are experts in what we do. And we have to own that to a large degree. And so feeling that you have the tools you need. And so if you're talking about, whether it's, tactical and technical, a labor law, an implication, a policy, making sure that you are well educated and understand in the same way that we expect people to be knowledgeable in their specific roles as well. And then being confident enough to say, this is, what we need to do. Here's the information. And then, working on that, that's how you earn respect. And that is, the same way everybody does. So whether you are in, whatever the role is, people grow in their careers, they learn, they ask questions. We have to do the same. I'm never afraid if I don't understand something or I don't know, I get an expert. If I don't understand, something about the business, I ask. And I think that sets a good example for people is that, you have to be able to show that we don't know everything, that there are things that we all continue to need to learn. And that then, sets a great modeling for people that we are trying to coach, because then they are less afraid themselves to say, I don't know how to do that. I understand what I need to do, but I don't know how to do it. So if we're modeling those behaviors, they can then do the same. it creates a really good cycle.
Oh yeah. Well, and that brings me to the question that I always want to ask HR leaders, especially because you're the head of culture. You are setting the mission, vision, and value statements, right? I've been a part of organizations. I've seen organization signs, and I know differently, right? They see that you see these signs, right? You see these values, and then you go into a sales meeting, and the values are kind of out the door, and it's whatever the values of that particular leader are, right? How do you uphold or protect the values? And like, how important do you think that is in being in HR when you see a value that's being contested or challenged, right, by a particular individual? How do you uphold those values, and how important do you think that is to really building a sound culture?
I think it's incredibly important. If you're going to say, we're going to do A, or we believe in B, and you don't, make sure that you're upholding those values, it damages a lot. And so really having the courage and the ability to say, that doesn't match with our values, this is what we need to do moving forward, is really important.
I love that.
Generally, I find that when people are, exhibiting behaviors that maybe don't match, it's generally not on purpose. And so a lot of times people just need to kind of understand. Maybe they didn't understand how it wasn't supporting. Maybe they weren't connecting the two things together. And so really kind of being that, coach or that, trusted advisor is really important. And that's, earlier we spoke about, creating relationships with people. You have to be able to create relationships with people where you can say, hey, we need to have a chat. How did you think that conversation went? What did you think about that meeting? And let them, because a lot of times people will then say, you know what, it kind of went sideways. It didn't go exactly the way I would have wanted. And then you have like that touch point. Sometimes people don't. And then you can say, it sounds like you felt that meeting went really well. I'm not sure if you, picked this up or if you saw that. And it again creates a start point.
Hey, you could start saying, would you say that in an interview? I was at the Global Leadership Summit, and that was like one of the takeaways. And I was dying laughing because it was like, would you say that in an interview? And everybody's like, oh, no, I probably wouldn't. Because everybody's like, oh, I'm a team player. I love everybody. I'll help anybody out. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
What's one other question that I had talking about really organizations right now probably feel like they're almost fighting a lot more fires instead of lighting the way. I see ACV Auctions. You're pretty much lighting the way now, right? You've really invested in your people. You see them as the pivotal piece to the puzzle of success for both the key stakeholders internally and externally. And it's kind of changing and evolving. We see the SEC starting to change and disclose some of these workforce metrics now because they understand the value of people. Where do you want to see ACV Auctions in the next 5 years?
Look, I think that we have a tremendous foundation. When I came here, there was already a great culture. What we've continued to do is build on that. In the time that I've been here, we've done things, we have a zero premium healthcare for all of our teammates that are benefits eligible. And I think that's, incredible. And so when we go back to, talking about having people feel like they're well taken care of so that they can then focus on, the tasks at hand is really important. And you talked earlier about, how do you connect with leaders and all those pieces? It's really being aligned on that. You can't talk the talk without walking the walk. So if you're going to say, or people come first, we're going to do everything we can to take care of them, you actually have to be able to deliver on that. And that doesn't mean that things happen overnight. It does mean that you're in a constant forward motion to continue getting better. And no matter how good you are, there's always an opportunity to be better. There's never this, we've reached the summit, you're there, there's no work to do. It's a continual pivot and it's a continual kind of forward motion. Again, if you would have looked at companies a year and a half ago, nobody would have said global pandemic. What does that mean? How does that impact, work from home? And so no matter where you think you are, there's always things that you can do to keep, improving. And then there's always new things that come out that become available or new things that, come to the forefront. So you have to be willing to change. You can't say, this is what we're going to do and, we're done and we're going to do this for the next 10 years.
I love that. You can always get better. And Sallie, I think we've talked a lot and we focused on the strategic side of HR and really kind of with a focus on HR leadership. I think a good portion of our listener base, might be newer to HR or maybe studying HR. Where do you see sort of the white space within the function today? Where folks from college can kind of come in and really make an impact out of the gate.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think would be super important for someone very new to an HR or people space is don't be afraid to get dug in, and don't be afraid to kind of learn about things that might be outside and kind of take on some stretch. Throughout my career, I've always kind of raised my hand and said, oh, that project needs to be done. Can I be a part of that? Oh, that sounds interesting. Can I join in? And I think that's important because especially, whether somebody's maybe specializing, maybe they work in a benefits role or a comp, but they might not have the other, or they work, in employee relations and don't have the other experience. Whenever you can lean in and learn other things, like I still learn things every day. I ask questions, I get myself involved. And so I think as someone enters a space, you can't say like, well, I work in comp, or I work in benefits, or I work in employee relations. It really needs to be, we're in this people space. And the more that we know across the areas, even just from learning, the more impact we'll be able to have. And so not to be afraid, just to kind of ask questions, learn, and to do the things that you might be a little bit afraid to learn about, or you don't know, so you don't ask the questions, put your hand up, don't be afraid to ask, for new knowledge.
Yeah, so it's almost like what you said from a macro level of the business, we can always be better as a business. We can always be better as individuals. We can be lifelong learners and, be a sponge and take in information. I think that's
Absolutely.
great.
Like I said, I learn every day. There's always something new to learn. And I think as long as people approach that, you will continue kind of your growth and evolution.
Powerful. So one of my favorite questions I always ask HR professionals, right? Why did you originally, Sallie, get into HR? Because I know you have a degree in, your first degree was in business communications, which is probably helping you significantly. And then you went back and got your master's in human resources.
I did. And so, I can tell you a little bit about kind of how that started. So I had communications of business was my first major. I somehow lucked into a second major of health science, not related, but it worked out that way. And during, I think early my senior year, I took a labor relations class, and I had a local labor attorney actually out of Rochester taught the class. And I was like, this sounds kind of fun. And then I, kind of explored, and then I went for my master's directly after. And, I really like people. I love helping people. And this was really a great opportunity to take a business acumen and apply it in a way that really impacts a large group of folks at a regular basis.
Here, I'll roll out that soapbox because I think Bobby and I always say, I think we can change the world. We can get back to being a community when businesses get better, when leaders get better. And it really is all driving from the HR because we're the people. So it's our opportunity to really improve. And I know you guys are doing and living that day in and day out. As we're wrapping up here, Sallie, I always want to know some of the answers to skills questions, right? If you could learn one skill overnight and become an expert in tomorrow, what skill would that be, and why would you choose that particular skill?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think really the skill would be probably to read people's minds, quite frankly. Which is not a skill.
When you figure that out, let me know.
Because really in reality, what we do a lot, right? We're assessing situations, and like we've talked about thematically here, it's really trying to understand, the root cause of things, and then you can kind of build. A lot of the challenges we have is we're trying to make a solution when we don't fully understand that. And so really, the skill is to continue to evolve, to be able to have kind of the patience sometimes to get to that root without just creating solutions along the way. And then for me, probably on the analytics side, I'm not analytics, by trade. I definitely, have learned a lot more about analytics. I understand their value. I think, as the people profession has evolved, there's a lot more types of analytics. There's a lot more standard practices, but we don't necessarily have a standard, right? There's 3 different ways you can calculate turnover. There's all of these different things. And so whereas in like accounting, you have standard accounting principles, we don't necessarily have those in the people space. And so really kind of continuing to evolve that. So when you're talking, you don't have to kind of clarify, this is the methodology we use, or becomes like the standard practice. And so, that might not be that if I could develop a skill overnight, but I would say that those are the things that I, continue to work on. That's
so cool to hear you even say, because I see that definitely being the future. ISO coming out with 2 certifications now. I mean, it's coming, right? And we always talk about how bookkeepers went to the right hand man or woman of the CEO because they were the only ones arming them with any new information, right? And that was the nationally accepted accounting principles, like you mentioned. One thing, and Bobby, I got one more question, and then I'm going to let you end it. But something I want to know, because you have your pulse, right? You get to hear what people are saying during interviews. You get to hear it and talk directly with your team on the front lines, having these conversations. One of the things I want to know is, where do you see the future of work headed, right? Where, I know we're talking about work from home. We're talking about gig work. We're talking about buying, renting, growing, or botting talent today. Where are you seeing the future of work?
I think what we'll continue to see is that we'll continue to evolve. And so I love like the HR evolution, right? The revolution, in that there's not going to be this static, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. It hasn't been like that in a long time, but all of these things that I think we need to be very cautious to kind of look at them as threats to one another and really, look at how they interplay. And so in some circumstances, work from home may be the right thing to do. Some circumstances, it's not even possible, right? You're customer facing, you're forward, you're out in public. And so I think being aware that there is no one size fits all approach. It's really going to depend on the business, on the needs, on where you live, on the type of work you do. And as the world continues to evolve, what that feels like. I definitely do see this, the folks that are work from home and love it. There is this missing of other people, even for the most introverted of folks. So I do think you're going to continue to see this like evolution of, there isn't going to be this one finite answer. It's going to be this continual kind of happening of what works. And I think, in 5 years, we'll look back at this conversation and we'll say, wow, where were we and where are we now? And every year, every 6 months, every month, that's going to change just based upon the world around us. Technology changes, the world changes, things like that.
Yeah. And you're so,
it'll be fun to look back and see.
It will be. I had to ask you because I know you're so in tune with the labor market, and it's interesting to kind of hear people's perspectives as to where we're headed, because you start reading studies about how gig work is going to eat into 60% of the job force, and the advancements in AI and technology, and then some jobs are displaced, and then they have to reskill or upskill themselves. Bobby,
It's going to be a constant kind of movement.
Yeah. All right. So, Sallie, I know I wanted to just say thank you so much for the opportunity to even have this floor with you. I feel like I'm talking again to my role model idol. It's amazing just to hear your progression in the HR field, and really how you went from obviously learning some pivotal things from the Wegmans family tree that really propelled you into the future. But you went back even further than the Wegmans and just went back into when you were in the field itself, right? When you had that job where that customer service was so important, and how that carried you forward. And then you brought in your business communications degree and found people, and you loved helping others. And that's how you found your way into HR, but you're always focused on how to add value back to the organization, developing those vitally important internal relationships, and always challenging yourself to head towards the problems instead of running away from them. And I think that's really what makes you different. But hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode, Sallie. But thank you again for being a part of the show with Bobby and I. And hopefully the HR community can take some of these examples of Sallie and how she approaches the role of HR and this revolution of the function of HR for the evolution of business.
Yeah, well, Kevin, Kevin and Bobby, thank you so much for having me today. Certainly, it's been a pleasure. Always, look forward to sharing my knowledge, and always look forward to learning from others. I hope out of this, folks have been able to take away, some next opportunities for themselves. But also, I look forward to connecting with more folks, because that's how I learn as well. So thank you again for the opportunity to join both of you today.
It was a blast, Sallie.
Thanks,
I knew
Sallie.
it would be.
Bye, guys. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.